Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. My name is Nikki Ryberg. I'm a career coach and resume writer based in the Madison, Wisconsin area. I help clients with all of their career and job search needs, and I'm super, super excited to have our guest speaker here today, who I will have introduce herself in just a few minutes. I actually was introduced to Kate through her sister, who was a speaker on here a few months ago. Her sister, Anne, has actually been my personal holistic mentor and an acupuncturist that I use. She helped me through some health things a few years ago, and I still seek her out for all sorts of good stuff. And she kept talking about this amazing sister of hers who had just gotten certified through Brene Brown's recent program, and said that she was doing a lot of really cool things in the leadership space. So she connected us thanks to the power of networking, and we did a networking session via Zoom. And I think we went way over in time. She had so many interesting things to share, and we both had like an HR background, which made it fun as well, and being solopreneurs and things like that. So today we're going to talk about resiliency, but before we dig into that, I want to allow Kate to really tell her story and introduce herself, and then we'll kind of go from there. And for those of you that are used to my format, I ask a lot of questions, and definitely weave any questions you have into the chat, because I'll be sure to do those. We really do mean for this to be informative and also slightly informal, so it just feels like real, like you're sitting here with a cup of coffee with us. So Kate, can you tell everyone, like, who are you? What the heck is Dare to Lead? And just like your background, because you're so qualified on this topic. It's just unbelievable. We're so honored to have you.
Oh gosh. Thanks so much, Nikki. I'm really excited to be here. And frankly, I feel like anybody that's still standing upright is qualified to talk about resiliency. After, we're living through a very unique time in history, a pandemic, and a social reckoning, and, fill in the blank of a dozen other things. So we all are very resilient. You all are very resilient. So I really, really believe that. But for me, I am a coach, a mentor, and a facilitator. I have spent probably 25 plus years in the corporate space of HR and learning and development. And, I was just looking back at this and my career, I'm going to tell a little bit about my story because it's not very traditional. So for those of you who are, and I'm assuming you're interested in this topic of career because this is Nikki, this is your people here. My career path is not really very traditional in terms of I spent 25 years plus in the space of talent development and HR and probably a dozen different roles with 2 companies. So I spent the first 15 years of my career with Land's End. I was one of those kids that got a driver's license and my parents said, here's a car and I'll go get a job. And so I started working at Land's End. I worked my way through high school and college there, and then got a degree in psychology, and worked in the recruitment and development space for Land's End for many, many years, and learned a ton. And then I shifted into UW Credit Union and spent the last 19 years of my career with UW Credit Union, also a really awesome values-based organization, where I served in about 4 or 5 different roles, again, all within the context of HR and talent development and learning and development. And during my time there, I learned about this thing called life coaching back in 2007. My mom had just passed away at the age of 55. Of a pulmonary embolism very suddenly, and that was my first, probably the biggest thing that really provided me some practice with resiliency was, grieving through, the grief process is a huge teacher in resiliency. And while I was taking some time to heal from that unexpected loss, I learned about this thing called life coaching, because I started to think about, those of you who have experienced loss, which is probably most everyone on this call, you recognize when you lose someone, it puts life into perspective really quick. And for me, part of that for me was, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Life short for some than others. What am I going to do? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And so through that process of rumbling, and I'll talk about the dare to lead, reckon, rumble, and revolution process. Through that process of rumbling with grief and rumbling with my purpose, I was talking to people about this process. And Annie, you mentioned my sister Ann, one day emailed me this email, and she said, it was an article about life coaching. And she said, "This is you." I was like, "Here's your sign, Kate." And I was like, "What is this thing called life coaching?" So I started researching it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I already have some natural passion for helping people, listening to people's stories, trying to help them access their own wisdom and, have those light bulb moments. That's like a great day for me when you can help somebody with a light bulb moment. And so I looked into it, talked to some local coaches. At that point in time, there was probably a handful of life coaches in the Madison area. Now there's life coaches, there's a life coaching school at University of Wisconsin. I mean, it's just boomed, this industry, and this is really boomed. So I gained my certification, and I talked to my boss, and I went to my boss and I said, okay, and I made a pitch. So, negotiation, this is a risk, kind of a vulnerable risk for me, right? I was like, well, if I don't ask, I'll never know. But I'm kind of frugal. So part of that, I'm kind of cheap. My husband, maybe somebody call it cheap, frugal, cheap, call it what you will. I was like, I'm going to see if somebody else, my organization will pay for me to do this, pay for my coaching class. So I went to my boss, and I was also, I at the time it was Lee Wurzma. He was a champion, fantastic leader, a wonderful man, a mentor of mine. And I said, Lee, there's this thing called life coaching. Here's the skills, here's the school. Now, I think if I get this education, I can show up and I can be a better HR business partner. I can be a better support for leaders and for employees in their development and their growth than I can today, because I think these skills will help me to show up and really help develop people and support engagement. I tied it to organizational goals and all that sort of thing. And he said, and he took a chance on me. He took a bet on me, and he took a chance on me. He said, all right, we'll pay for this. And so, as part of that training, I had to coach some folks. And so I reached out I just kind of blanket email, threw out an invitation to leaders across the organization and said, hey, if you have anybody that's hungry for development, if you have anybody that you don't have time to coach and develop, but you'd like to have somebody support them, they're really hungry for a little more, I got to get some coaching hours in. I'd be happy to, I'll put a program together. We'll structure it, and, let me with them, let me add them. And I think one of those individuals is actually on this call today. And so I got to coach some folks, and I got some practice, and I didn't do it perfectly. But I did it. And that's how I started coaching, and then ultimately became an internal coach for UW Credit Union. I think there's 3 or 4 certified coaches now, and leaders that are actually going through the program at UW-Madison. So it kind of became kind of a pioneering practice and fit very well with the organization in terms of lines of, that organization is dedicated to growth. It's dedicated to development. It's dedicated to taking care of its people and helping them grow and develop. So it was a natural fit. So that I became a coach and started coaching folks on emotional intelligence, working with leaders, which was the favorite part of my job. Also did a lot of individual development coaching with individual contributors across the credit union, and started my own private coaching practice part-time alongside of that. So I would get folks just, reaching out kind of ad hoc to look for someone to help them with, a lot of times it's career transition, Nikki and folks. A lot of times it's folks, having, feeling stuck, figuring out how do I go about this? What do I want to be when I grow up? And so I worked with just a handful of folks outside of that. And then a few years ago, I ran across this author and the work of Brené Brown. And I started reading Daring Greatly. It was the first book. And I started to pick this book up, and I was like, where have you been? Brené Brown, where have you been all my life? Oh my gosh. And at that time, I was in the process of working with a group of women at UW Credit Union. We were working on founding an employee resource group, a women's leadership network there. And we were so I was with like-minded women who were about, growing other women. I was like, ladies, have you heard of this book? Have you heard of this author? And they were all like, yeah. how come you haven't heard of this? How this person? I was like, I don't know. But, as they say, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. And that's certainly the case with me and Brene. And maybe some of you can attest to that, or maybe you feel the same way. So right about that time, she had just published Dare to Lead. And when she published Dare to Lead, it was really this culmination. This Dare to Lead work is a culmination of a 3-year study that she did on leadership, where she went out and interviewed 150 C-suite leaders and asked them, what do you got? What is the key to leadership in the next 5 to 10 years? This is before the pandemic, PS. This is before the pandemic. And they said, we need braver cultures and more courageous leaders. And she said, awesome, cool. What's that look like? Tell me about your leaders that are courageous. And she gets her ground theory, research your brain going. And they're like, well, we can tell you what it isn't. We can tell you what it doesn't look like. So like she does, she's kind of noted for backing into it and saying, all right, let's figure out what gets in the way. She studies what gets in the way, which really attracts me to her work as well. Because that's part of this resiliency piece is we gotta look at what gets in the way. It's not about, oh, have a great attitude. I mean, it is about have a great attitude, do this. It is about, the stuff that you've got to have a mindset of moving forward, but you also have to address what's getting in the way of what's creating barriers, or you're just scooting around and you're not really addressing root issues. So we're not addressing the root issues. And so this Dare to Lead book is about a skill set that was identified that's teachable, learnable, measurable. You can learn it, you can practice it, you can be more courageous. Is it easy? No. Is it hard? Yes. Is it worth it? It is, because I was just talking, and I'll tell you, my client of mine yesterday just told me in the most perfect way, and this is a woman who's been through tremendous turmoil in her life and is trying to create a childcare center in a city where there's no childcare. She's trying to do this ground up. She has no background in childcare, but she's got the guts, the courage, and she's being very vulnerable and very courageous to create this thing to provide support and services for her community. She said, and I asked her, I go, how are you doing this? How are you showing up? Like, even me, I'm like, how in the heck are you showing up when people are like attacking your character? And she said, I'm able to do it because I'm practicing these skills, and it's still hard. But the benefit for me is that it's not as painful. I'm not sleeping well because I'm working a lot, but I'm not losing sleep because I feel like I'm out of alignment with my values. I'm not losing sleep because I feel like I'm not being true to who I am. I'm not losing sleep because I'm in a shame storm. Do I still experience shame? Yeah, but I'm not like pummeled by the shame. I can do it. And it's still hard, but it's not as painful because I'm aligned up and I know, like, I can't not do it. She said, I can't not do it. And I was like, I got goosebumps. And I'm like, woo, you could teach a master class in resiliency. I was just so inspired by this client. So that's what really drew me to this work and drew me to the work of Brene, is that, it's about being real, resiliency, dealing with shame, vulnerability to me is about being real. And I'm no expert in it, but I'm a committed practitioner. And that's really, when I work with folks, that's really what I the invitation and the challenge is, I'm just going to facilitate. I love to show up in spaces like this one, Nikki, that you create, where we invite people to just grow and learn and explore. And it's a safe and brave environment to do that. And so in December of last year, I shifted away from full-time employment with UW Credit Union and became a solopreneur and decided I'm going to do this Kate Adametz coaching, be my own boss for a while, and take this work and, spread it, provide it, share it, help folks out in any way that I can through this training and training that I provide sort of peripherally along with it.
I love it. Thank you. I had a couple of things I wanted to add from that, because you actually inspired me on a few things you said. The first being, we just did a topic on negotiation, I think just last month. She's on the call today. So hi, Jen. I think Kate raised a really good point. Sometimes negotiating for things like getting certifications paid for can be something else you can negotiate for besides just money, because that can lead to such tremendous long-term career growth. A second point I want to bring up, and I know that we're going to get into this a little more. And when Kate and I talked, I'm like, I want to talk more about leadership with my clients and with my network, because I'm here for like the career and job search side, but I'm not a leadership expert, and I'm curious what's out there. One thing I advise my clients to do is look for organizations that are doing things like this. So like Kate mentioned, UW Credit Union was a big believer in this. They rolled it out. They were willing to use it. I think that's a really good question to ask in an interview, is what sort of leadership training do you provide to your leaders? What sort of opportunities do you have for individual contributors? And actually ask like for the names, for the theories they use, things like that. Because any of us that were really good at being slick with our recruiting, which I always tried to be very transparent, but there's ones out there that are not. They'll like tell you what you want to hear and you just kind of move on to the next topic, but like really find the places where they're doing this, because I have found that's where my clients are the most happy. Like I don't actually have any clients from UW Credit Union. I have a lot trying to get in, some things like that. So I think that's really interesting. And this is such a broad topic that Kate and I were like, where do you even start? And resiliency came up over and over again. And I was super frustrated with my kids the other day. And I was like jotting down some questions for today. And so I want to talk about, first of all, Kate, like why is resiliency such a kind of baseline to this topic? But do I need to work on my resiliency, or am I just impatient? Because sometimes I can't tell which it is with me, my kids, my husband, my social circle. And I'm curious within an organization, if they're one and the same or how that looks. And that's a pretty broad question, but I just want to start with like, why is resiliency such a cornerstone of the work you're doing? And how does that tie into leadership? And what can folks on this call do? So let's start there and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, great. First of all, great question. When you posed that in your LinkedIn post, I was like, ooh, she does ask good questions. So first of all, I want to start with a definition of what we're talking about with resiliency. What I'm talking about with resiliency is really Richard Davidson's, a lot of Richard Davidson's work from the Center of Creative Leadership? No, that's not it. Wiseman Center in Madison there. He's done a ton of work around this, emotional brain. Emotional intelligence and the emotional life of your brain, I think his name was book. But the definition of resiliency is your ability to bounce back from a setback, our ability to rebound, get back to center after a setback. So it's the coming back. It's a little bit different than grit. Sometimes I think when I think about resiliency, what I'm really thinking about, what we're really talking about is grit, which Angela Duckworth writes about and is an expert in the area of. And that's more of like tenacity. It's more of like stick-to-itiveness. It's more of like chutzpah. Like I can just, I can barrel through this. So they're very, of course, closely connected, but with resiliency, it's about, all right, I didn't get the job. I had a loss. I can't, things are not working. My kids aren't listening. I'm in grief. I lost something. It's some kind of a setback. I feel stuck because I'm not getting called back, that sort of thing. So it's about coming back from a setback. And the importance of that is, and that's why I say we're all resilient, because we're still standing. Like the importance of that is like to be able to be in a place of okayness. It's not perfection. It's not, yay, it might not be 100%, but to be at a place where I feel like, I'm at peace. I feel okay. It might not be okay, but I'm okay. I mean, I might be in a situation where things aren't 100% okay, but I'm still okay at some level, so that we can show up lined up with our values, so that we can show up in a way that feels in integrity with ourselves, even though we might be navigating in a very chaotic or unfair, fill in the blank kind of stressful situation. So that resilience is the ability to bounce back. Now, the title leadership is what happens, and this is Brene Brown's work, the Dare to Lead work. She researches vulnerability, shame, and empathy, and a bunch of other emotions, but those are the biggies. What happens when we reach a setback? What happens when we get what she'll say is face down in the arena? So is that we oftentimes have shame come up. Shame oftentimes comes up, and she refers to shame as season ticket holders in the arena. So if we think about this metaphor of the arena as a vulnerable moment or a place where we maybe, we have a setback. So we fall face down, we come into the arena and we trip and fall, boom, face down in the arena. Somebody doesn't like what we said on Facebook. Somebody doesn't agree with this, that, or the other. We're getting criticism, or again, what your situations are. I know what my situations are. I'll give you an example. We're in the arena. First, I'll describe the arena, and then I'll give you an example. So we go into the arena and we experience a setback, or we fall down in the arena. When we get into that arena, there's seats in the arena, and the critics, the season ticket holder seats in that arena are shame. And that shame has two messages for us. You're not good enough, and who do you think you are? So when we fall down, shame is right there to say, oh, well, there you go again. See, you weren't good enough. See, you don't know what you're talking about. And that is a natural tendency. The beauty, one of my favorite things, and this is one of the favorite, it's like the good news of Brene Brown's work, is that we all experience it. Shame is a natural human emotion, and it's there to protect us. It's there to protect us. See, we can't tell the difference. Our bodies and our physical and our emotional bodies can't tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat. So they can't, if we're in the arena and there's a gladiator coming at us, and we're in the arena and there's folks sitting over in the cheap seats saying, oh, look at her, we still have the same response. We have a reaction to that, a self-protection reaction. So what happens? We experience shame. Who do you know? What do you know? Who do you think you are? And then we got to armor up. We armor up because we got to fight, self-protect, and fight off either the gladiator and or the shame messages. But the good news is that it's not just you. It's not just me. We all experience it. And if you don't believe me, just ask somebody you're close to, and they will say, oh yeah. I mean, we've talked about their inner critic, the inner saboteur. We all have it because it's a self-protective mechanism. And so the 103, the 101s of shame from a leadership perspective is everybody has it. This is what we talk about and we teach in Dare to Lead in a much deeper level. We give people actually time to rumble with this. Everybody has it. And the only folks that don't have it are folks that lack the capacity for empathy. So we have a couple of choices. We either admit to experiencing shame, or we admit to being a sociopath. Usually this is the only time where shame is the preferable option. We all experience it, but we don't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. In fact, I'll just be very transparent. I was probably teaching and working through my, doing my own work, teaching this work for 18 months before I could say shame without being having an internal visceral kind of cringe with the word. We all experience it. We don't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Number 3, the more we don't talk about it, the more it follows us around like a shadow. And I remember when I was training with Brene, she put her hand behind her back and she goes, it just follows you around. And then it's like pushing you around and you're just trying to you're looking for this, but it's there. And what happens is when we speak, when we name it, first step of resiliency, name it. What is the emotion I'm feeling? So when we are able to say, oh, you know what, it's just shame. I'm just feeling some shame around this. If only to ourselves, we don't have to walk around not saying we go out and say, oh, I'm just in a shame storm. But we start with acknowledging it for ourselves. Oh, I'm feeling here it is again. We acknowledge it. When we put it out in front, then we have we see it, it loses its power. And if we really want to get after it, we add some empathy to it. And Brene invokes this visual of a petri dish where you have shame in this petri dish, and you take a dropper and you add a little empathy to it. It cannot survive. So if it's seen, it can't survive.
Walk me through, we'll use this as a generic example because I think it could apply to pretty much anyone. Let's just say someone's unhappy in their career or job. Maybe they don't like their boss. Maybe they don't like their schedule. Maybe they're legit laid off, terminated, whatever, and they don't have a job. But anything involving something where you're not happy in the job or career space, resiliency becomes unbelievably important to continue to bounce back from that and go towards what you want. I see some things like people just don't even try to figure out what they want because they just get so lost in all the muck, they give up. Some people just stay in a bad situation because it seems easier than the alternative, but very high level. Walk me through some tips or strategy about resilience if someone is unhappy in a career or job setting. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So the 3 steps of the Dare to Lead resiliency skill set are the reckon, rumble, and revolution process. Reckon, rumble, and revolution. The reckoning is what's going on with me? What am I feeling right now? It's really recognizing the emotion that I'm feeling. In your case, maybe I'm feeling PO'd. Maybe I'm feeling really angry. Oftentimes, anger is a go-to emotion for us, myself included. I feel really angry about this. My boss is not fair. My boss is not, my boss is a jerk. My boss is fill in the blank, right? So when we reckon with that emotion, we're like, okay, but then we have to start to kind of rumble with that. All right, what's underneath that anger? And we have to start asking ourselves some more questions like, what's really bothering me about this? So what's really bothering me about my boss? Like, what is it about he or she or they that I'm really struggling with? And I'm talking about internal work. This takes some time, but this is the internal work. So the reckon is what's really bothering me, and anger could be it, but then why? What is really bothering me about the anger? And maybe it's like, well, I feel like, well, I don't know, what might be what's an answer that could come up? I feel like they don't trust me, or I don't trust them. That's something.
Or what about things they can't control? I'm really angry, the phone's not ringing, or I'm really angry they're not giving me a promotion. I'm really angry they did a layoff. I think a lot of times this self-work I've found easier in my personal life, but it's harder on the job side because you have so much less control over things. Oftentimes people get so stuck in the lack of control. I'm not sure sometimes I ever see them even get deep enough in the rumble part like you're describing, let alone, I don't know what revolution is, but I'm dying to find out. So keep going. Hopefully that didn't get you on a different tangent, but use the example of the phone's not ringing and they hired a resume writer and did all the things and it's still not flipping ringing. So what do? Or they still didn't get the promotion. Both things they can't control.
Yeah. So great question, Nikki, because one of the questions that I love to ask as a coach, and people hate it, but is what can you control? What do you have control over? Because 3 options when we're in that situation. Here's the tip, here's the tool. 3 options when we are in the rumble. We're working with that emotion. Then when we're in the rumble, we have number 1, we got it, and all of them involve change. PS. And change is hard because it involves a loss. But we can change our mindset about it. We can change the dynamic and do what we can to try to change the relationship, the situation, or we can change the situation, change bosses, change jobs. And I'm going to start with mindset, because mindset, I mean, we really have to shift. It really requires how we think about something. And, another question that you asked me kind of linked to this earlier was, how do I keep my spirits up? Like, how do I even get the wherewithal to do something different? And when I work with folks, and maybe you do too, we have to figure out a couple things. We got to understand what brings us energy. Like if I'm working with someone as a coach, I'm like, where's your energy? We got to go where the energy is. Like, this is part of being authentic and intentional. It's like, who are you? What lights you up? And then that's where we're going. So we are on one hand, what lights you up? where are we going? Who do you like to work with? And what is it that you like about, what is it sometimes if we can't find anything else, we can link with our values. If we know our values and our strengths, we can kind of sync up with those and try to approach the problem, try to approach the situation from a place that we know really well, which is typically, what's really important to us. And sometimes it's easy. Sometimes people have, if this is unknown, that's again, something that maybe we dig into a little bit, or I'll tell you a tool that I've used with my clients, and maybe others have run into this, is this idea of a personal hedgehog. So it riffs off of Jim Collins's hedgehog concept from the book Good to Great. And this is a book that, again, I was introduced to at UW Credit Union. It's a part of the leadership curriculum there. But in this book, Jim describes a sweet spot of understanding what you're really, really good at, understanding what you're really, really passionate about, and intersection of that with the goal. So when you find that intersection of that sweet spot, it's a little heart between those things, that's where you do really good work. And that's where you serve clients. And so from a personal perspective, as somebody that wants to, if I really want to find something and I really am looking for what I do want instead of what I don't want, that is an activity that where we do a values clarification. So if you are someone that is, for those of anyone on the call that's kind of looking to get some energy and some spirit around, going in the mojo of the direction that you want, an activity that we have done is to do a values clarification exercise or activity if you haven't done that, and really kind of get clear on what your top 2 to 5 values are. I really highly recommend and love StrengthsFinder assessment from Gallup, because this provides information around what you're really, really good at. Go ahead.
Let's say they did those and we're still kind of in that rumble, and you had said it was like mindset, the dynamic or situation. Talk to me a little more about that. So they've identified what they want, but they're still not quite getting it, and they're kind of stuck in this rumble. Besides their mindset, what else can they work on, or what do they need to change in order to lead to the revolution?
Yeah. Well, here's where the intention really becomes important. And I love, if you're interested in learning more about this intention, I highly recommend the book Crucial Conversations and the chapter Start with Heart. I teach Crucial Conversations as well, and it's one of my favorite trainings that I've done with UW Credit Union. But that Start with Heart chapter is all about identifying what you want and acting in alignment with what you want. So if I am in a struggle with my boss and we don't see eye to eye, and whatever the case may be, I have to identify, what is my intention? I start with my intention. What is it that I really want here? And that's the question that is asked from the research-based book of Crucial Conversations. What is it that I really want to have happen here? Here's an example. I want to have a harmonious working relationship with my boss. I want to have a healthy professional working relationship with my boss. Maybe it's not even going to be harmonious. I say harmonious for me personally because harmony is one of my top strengths. And harmony is not always possible to actually achieve, but I can show up with harmony. And that's took me quite a while to figure out. Like, I don't know if I can achieve harmony because I don't have control over the other person, but I can I do have control of how I show up. And if I show up with harmony, if I show up with, this is my intention, is I want to have a healthy, trustworthy, trusting working relationship with my boss. That's what I want. Then I start to think about, well, how do I show up and how do I bring that to the table then? So that's leading with intention. That's showing up with intention. That's the change part. So and sometimes sometimes we make that an explicit part of the conversation. One of the things I've done, and I found really helpful, and is a practice at UW Credit Union, there's lots of best practices there, but one of them is a partnership agreement. It's like, an agreement where, we identify, I identify 3 or 4 things that are really important to me that support me to feel like I'm in a healthy professional relationship. And then my boss does the same thing. And we come together and we say, okay, here's kind of our agreements of how we want to work together. And we understand a bit more about each other. So how do I want to receive feedback is a great question. How do I want to give and receive feedback? What do I need from you if you have feedback to share with me? How do you best receive feedback if I have something I want to talk with you about? And then you can fill in the blank on some other questions. But it really starts with the intention of, and this is part of the mindset too, because we know we're really entrenched with what we don't want, because it's what's bothering us, right? It's really what gets at us. So the mindset shift first is, okay, what is it I do want here? And then I start to act as if, and I start to show up. And part of that is, what I say. So in some cases I might be able to say it. In other cases, I might not feel comfortable to say it, but I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to ask questions. Here's what I really want. And so I might start to behave a little bit differently, like the partnership agreement, or, thinking from the end, or how can we work together? What is it that you need? Maybe start asking some questions.
What
I don't
about
know, maybe others on the,
What about in the
Go ahead.
situation of a job seeker where the phone's just not ringing? Like they've identified what they wanted. They're still kind of sitting in this rumble sense. Like, do they have to wait until they get a job to hit the revolution? Like, how do you work through those things when it's like, you've done everything you can do, you've done everything right, and now you've put it out into the universe and you're waiting for it to come back? Walk me through what that would look like for someone who wants to pivot industries and they did all the right things. Like there's nothing else they can work on and the phone's just not ringing. Then what? They get really tired of me continuing to preach networking, because honestly, I don't know what else to say. That's all you can keep doing. But I mean, seriously, what are thoughts there? Because this happens all the time, with whether this is the scenario or it's something else, but let's use this one.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good, Nikki. And I, first of all, want to just say, I empathize with that place. And that's a hard spot to be in. And it would be a really scary spot to be in too. I can imagine it'd be a really challenging and really scary. I'm a risk averse person. I'm not a big risk taker. So if I'm in that spot, I'm feeling, oh my gosh, I'm feeling a lot of scarcity. I'm feeling a lot of, this is just me, right? I'm just kind of trying to empathize and get in the shoes of that place. I'm feeling scarcity. I'm feeling a lot of fear, right? I'll tell you this, what I have practiced, and the rumble here is, what am I figuring out what's getting in my way again? So what am I scared of? So looking at what am I afraid of? The rumble is what's getting in my way, but primarily it's what am I afraid of? What's the worst thing what am I afraid of? And really kind of taking some time maybe to journal that or talk through it with a trusted person. The other part is, again, there's an energetic component. Again, I don't know if this is in the Dare to Lead work so much, but from a practitioner and a personal perspective, there is an energetic component to manifesting folks with what you want. And so I believe my approach to work is first you, then what? So I might have been doing all the right things, and I am doing all the right things, but the question I would have is, what's the energy that is going along with those things? What energy are you putting out with those things? Do they feel authentic? Do they feel like yes? Or do they feel like, you know what, I feel like authentic with this. I feel like, yeah. And maybe some yes, maybe some no. But doing some work, doing some like connecting with values, connecting with strengths, connecting with passions and your purpose, like spending some time thinking about, gosh, does this feel like on purpose? Does this feel like something that is really exciting to me? And kind of spending a little bit of time just understanding, kind of getting to that place of energy. And sometimes that's, talking to somebody who really believes you and believes in you. Brene, one of the tools in Dare to Lead is having a square squad and leveraging that square squad. And it's individuals, and they're just a few that know you and are going to tell you the truth, but are also going to lift you up and support you and remind you who you are. And it only takes one. The good news is some of us might be saying, I know some folks will be like, oh my God, I don't even have that. But it just takes one person to see you and to help, to kind of help lift you up. So I see somebody's looking to contribute to the conversation. I'd love to hear from some other thoughts or perspectives of things, if that's okay, Nikki, from folks that maybe have some insights or thoughts on this.
Absolutely. We had a question from Abby, but I'm going to come back to that next because it was more on tools and measuring. I'm going to let Jessica go first because I think it's related to this conversation. So let's do it that way.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, ladies, thank you for putting this together. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been on both sides of it, you know, as a coach, working through those struggles that clients have once like our engagement to get them set up for the job search is done and they're out there and they're like put everything out in the universe and things are just they feel like things aren't different. It's kind of like they have the tools, they've been educated, we hope that they are not going back. I mean, because we're not with them 24/7, but they haven't gotten back to old habits that obviously weren't working. So you're hoping, you're crossing your fingers that what they're telling you, they're following kind of what you have given them, that we know if you stick to it, it will happen. But to your, you know, I think, Kate, you said basically things that are out of their control, but then naturally you're scared and you need somebody to blame. Who's the scapegoat? Well, the scapegoat is the person you just paid a lot of money to, and things aren't happening in this like arbitrary time that it's supposed to happen. You know, and because I have a client right now, she was and also when you have them on through the engagement, you can tell you get a sense of them pretty well how they work. You know, are they getting the job done? Are they getting the assignments done in timely manner? Are they following up? Are they responsive? There's indicators to give you some confidence that they're going to use these. They're going to behave in a way that's going to, again, get some traction. So I have a client very much like that, and she hasn't said it, but I know her well enough that, you know, the fact that the results aren't happening as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, before she hired me, she was doing, I hate to say this, but she was doing all the wrong things. That's just the bottom line, that. And now she's taken in what I've given her, and things are just not happening as much as she thought. Oh, you know, Jessica gave me like the magic, like a magic wand. And it's like, oh, you know, so yeah, I mean, it's, as a coach, I feel for people and I want so much for things to happen, but it's like, what you can do at that point. So that's just, you know, I wanted to add to the conversation.
I want to add one thing to that too. Something Kate had said was about like the energy you're putting out there. I have noticed a lot of times I keep reframing it to clients, like, what are you doing to help them? What are you doing in identifying their job ads that you can do for them? What are you doing in the networking and what you can do for them? And I do tend to sense some patterns of folks that keep saying it's not working, or I'm doing all of it. And they keep reframing everything about themselves. And I'm like, but this is a two-way street. And so I feel like that energy component is very important in the job search process. And I do find the more resilient people are, the more likely they are to bounce back or learn from some of those things. So what's the difference between the people who just kind of sit like treading water versus the ones who continue to learn to bounce back from these setbacks? Because it's really, really freaking hard.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know the truth with a capital T of the answer to this. What I know is what I've observed and what I've learned, and what I've experienced. So I can speak from my own experience from this, and add my 2 cents here and from the work of Dare to Lead. But I really think that part of the bouncing back piece is that revolution part. So, you know, you were like, I can't wait to hear about the revolution. The revolution is what you learn. Good, bad, ugly, whatever you're going through, what are you learning? And the ability to have a learner's mindset and a growth, this is a growth, everybody talks about growth mindset. Growth mindset and fix, hey, maybe that's one of the answers here. Do I have a growth, to what degree do I have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset about this? Maybe that's one of the characteristics, right? So fixed mindset, it's not working, I can't get it, it's not working, it's not going to happen. A cousin to the helpless mindset, victim, villain, helpless, right? Those are stories that we tell each other. We tell victim stories, somebody else's problem, victim, I can't help it, it's nothing I can do, helpless story. Also very, very close, nothing I can do. So growth mindset, I got to focus on what I can control, what's important to me. I can learn, I might not have something, I might not have it yet. Right? This is something we teach my daughter. I don't know math. I don't know this stuff in math. I don't know it yet. I can't find a job. I have not found my job yet. Right? So there's that forward positivity, element of positivity in there. But the revolution is about the learning. Brene writes about the delta. The delta is a mathematical sign for difference. What's the difference? So if we do get the job, or we don't get the job, or we're on the other side of this situation. Let's say we do get the job, or we're still waiting. What am I learning here? What am I learning here about what's working and what's not working? What am I learning? And what can I take from this? Even, what's the one thing I can take from this? This worked, this didn't work. And so individuals that can, I think, even if the situation, like, again, my client, I use this client that I worked with yesterday, she's like she's working and expending all kinds of energy in this startup and has come 2 or 3 months into this, and she's in the quitting zone. So it's, rubber's hitting the road here. They got to launch. They got to have inspections done. And she's like, I don't know if this is actually going to go or not. I honestly do not know if this is going to come through or not. I don't know if we're going to actually make it. But I'll tell you what I have learned through this process. She's like, I'm a learning, whether it's going to go or not. She can pick out what I'm learning. And so even if it doesn't go, she's going to be okay. She's going to be resilient. So even if I don't get the job, or even if this isn't a job, what does this mean for me? Like, what else can I do? What's next? What might I try? Who can I talk to? What else could I do? So having that growth mindset and the learning component.
I love that. Abby had a question that said, do you have any tools that you can recommend for measuring resilience in people to help them see if they need to work on this skill? I think many people aren't sure if they are resilient or not. Or what would you use to focus on this specific topic? Interesting.
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Yeah, really interesting, Abby. A couple things. Thanks for asking that. A couple things. Number one, Brene Brown, on Brene Brown's website, she has a Dare to Lead assessment. It's free. Takes less than 5 minutes, and it will give you immediate feedback. They do not keep your results. They do not keep your data, but it will give you immediate feedback on your skills, your level of skill on the 4 skill sets of courage: vulnerability, rumbling with vulnerability, living in your values, braving trust, and rising strong, which is the resiliency. So that's a tool that's free. Go out to the Brene Brown website, click on the Dare to Lead hub, and take that and get a real quick feedback on level of resiliency. The other thing that is more of an observation, more of a personal practice that I would recommend is resiliency is about bouncing back from a failure or a setback. And the degree that it takes you, the time it takes you to get back to center from the time of the setback is a measure of resiliency. So if I get a poor performance appraisal, if I get a decline on my job, or I'm faced out on the arena because I'm not hearing back, how off center am I? How down in the shame loop? The shame loop can sound like nothing's happening. I'm not good enough. I don't whatever it is, woe is me. We've all been there. How long does it take me to get out of that and shift back to, okay, game on. All right, here, I'm back in the saddle. Here we go. Like how long does it take you to get there? Now it could, if it takes maybe it takes weeks, but if we just, and it's about progress, or maybe it takes days, maybe it takes a few hours, maybe it's, when we lessen and when we shorten that amount of time to get back to center, that's building resiliency. We can bounce back faster than we used to. Hopefully that's helpful.
That was awesome. I shared your info in the chat because we're getting close to about the 5-6 minute mark, and I want to really just leave it time for questions. So Kate has some really great events coming up. So those are posted in the eventbrite.com link. And then there's also her email, her phone number, and her LinkedIn info. So I highly recommend connecting with her and checking some of those out. But what other questions do folks have? Or did you leave here feeling like, okay, cool, I know where to go next? Or are you still like wondering, where can I get more info on a certain topic? Because we only have an hour to chat. I wish that we could solve all the magic questions on resiliency. If that were the case, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sitting off on an island somewhere because I'd make so much money. So what else do people have? Like, what else can we kind of end with? Feel free to use the chat or just, unmute yourself and chat, because I'm going to quit talking and let everyone else. I've got some chat ones. Let me see what we got. We got a thank you so much, Kate. You're amazing. Thanks for sharing your insights. Someone else said, I benefited greatly from Kate's time at UW Credit Union as a coach and teacher. Great information today. No kidding. If I would have just died to have worked at an organization that actually empowered their employees and their leaders this much. I never did. And I mean, maybe one position did. And that's kind of how I fell into self-employment, because I could do it for myself. So for those folks that are lucky enough to benefit from that, or if you are job seeking, seek it out where they do this sort of stuff, because it makes such a difference with the culture.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, that's one thing I was going to share at the beginning is I've always really, and I haven't been two employers, 3 now, including myself over my career, but I would always, values alignment was really important to me. So I always worked for an organization, and Land's End and the credit union both were principle-based, client-centered, values-based organizations. And that was like a non-negotiable for me, is I had to work place where I could show up and I believed in what I was doing, and worked with people that also had that same type of belief. So a values-based organization. And so anytime somebody comes to me and says, hey, I always say, look for organizations that, have good reputations in the area. Look for people that where they do provide growth, and I recommend UW Credit Union every time. And there's others as well, but they're the real deal. It's hard to get in because I think it's hard to get in, but because they're very specific around wanting people that are very values aligned there. But it's a great organization, and they're there to take care of people, the financial needs of people. So look for an organization that, lines up with you, that you get kind of excited about and you can see yourself there. When people are interviewing you, and I worked in recruitment and HR, like you, Nikki, and like others in the call possibly, I wanted to be able to see you working for me. I wanted to be able, in the interview, I wanted to be able to see you there. So I've told people, paint a picture of what you're like to work with. Paint a picture of what it's like to be around you. Paint a picture of, and how you do that is going to take some practice. It might not be easy, but when you're in the interview, bring a little energy, and if you are values aligned, you're interested, the more you're interested and the more you have some passion, again, some energy around that, the more that's going to show up in the interview, and the more that's going to show up in the space. And that's attractive. Passion is attractive.
Isn't that the truth? I think for the folks that are just waiting for the phone to call, continuing to keep that positive mindset so huge. But if you get too mucked down in the negative, it starts to come out. You can usually tell it. And it's like, oh, I know that's easier said than done, but continuing to focus on those things and adding the value and the passion, I think can really helps forward that process from what I've seen. What else do people have? Well, we'll wrap up. Kate, thank you so much. This was really an awesome talk. Great plug for UW Credit Union too. I mean, man, if anyone on here's
Forever.
job searching, we've got a couple of folks on the call. I think Denise might be one of them. You might want to network and connect after this call. Might be some, referral opportunities and things like that. You know me, it's always about connecting. And yeah, based on all of this stuff I've heard and from other folks, I think it sounds like a tremendous place to work. And I think being able to be in a culture where they really embrace this would be just phenomenal. So please feel free to use direct chat and reach out to one another. And just thank you so much for your time today, Kate. I highly encourage people to take advantage of some of her upcoming seminars. There's so much to learn on this topic. I've been listening to a lot of Brené's books, and every time I'm just like, wow, every time I listen to it, I learn so much. So I can't wait to see where else you go, and the organizations and people you're able to impact will be pretty incredible. So thank you so much. I'm going to hit stop recording so we can at least wrap